Hello, good evening and welcome. This is Jared Walters with the Now Debate. I am here with Richard Oliver once again, my partner in crime from Pontypridd, and we've also got very much delighted to welcome Anne back to the show after your appearance here last month. To offer us some more code insights on this absolutely crazy situation that we find ourselves in on planet Earth. How are you both doing this evening?
Doing well.
Good. Yeah. I'm all right. I'll leave it. Sorry, my phone is come alive. Right. No, I'm all right. Yeah, it's for another show. I feel like I just start ranting if I talk about how I'm feeling, so it's best for another show, I think.
So you want to rant? Anne, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm hanging in there. I feel like there's so much right now, and there's so much that's happening, so much that's going on, and so I'm kind of taking some deep breaths through it all. But I think I'm good.
Well, we have been talking since the last time that you came on the show, sporadically over Facebook. And if you remember the last time you were on the show, one of the reasons I invited you back on here was I had a dream. I was told in the dream that you would have your finger on the pulse of everything that's happening around the world. But also I seen things kicking off, specifically like riots around you. And now, although obviously it's not like 100% in your neighbourhood, it is happening literally in your area of the world, and you are kind of in the middle of things that seem to be kicking off now in especially in the United States at the moment. So that's kind of come true, and since then I asked you about this, and maybe this is a good place to start the show because it kind of will bridge the gap between last show and this show. I had a comment off a friend. This friend is someone I haven't really spoken to for about 10 years, about 8 to 10 years, and they have nothing to do with the paranormal whatsoever. They are literally living out their normal lives, about 250 odd miles away from me, and we started talking literally about a few weeks ago, and he messaged me out of the blue and he says, "Do you know anything about this code?" And I said, "What code is that?" And it was 0010110. And I kind of dwelled on it for a little while because it was like I had this feeling when I looked at it. I knew what it meant. I knew that it was kind of like it had something to do with like standing up for what you believed in. It had something to do with things being righted, wrongs being righted, but it had something to do as well with like almost like a pushing and pushing back, like a to in and fro in, then, if that makes sense. So like I asked you about it, and I was wondering if you could offer just on the show the insights that you gave to me about that, because when the friend obviously went looking for it, he saw random videos about people who were talking to divine councils of light and beings from other worlds, and he was like, "What the hell is this all about?" Completely out of his comfort zone. Totally love him. It was.
And I honestly don't remember exactly what I sent you in information. I'm just going to be upfront because a lot of times when I look at something, I am, I'm very much in the moment, and it's coming off of my head in the moment, as well as, all these things that are moving through it. But I do know in what you sent me, there are a couple of different pieces that we have connected into it. And there is a lot of creation energy in this. There is a lot of aspect of harmonizing a body, mind, spirit principle and various things like that. But there is a lot to do within this code pattern, an aspect that has to do with how power is being used, how power is being wielded, and opportunities that we have. And those opportunities can be really good, or they can bring us crashing down, depending on how the power is being used, who's in charge, and what they're doing with their power. This code pattern also has within it aspects of needing to stand up for oneself in it, needing to stand strong in what is right, and standing up for the people who don't have a voice, actually. Yeah. It's about standing up against those people who are trying to suppress the truth from coming out, trying to suppress the information, trying to suppress somebody who maybe goes against the narrative of whoever is in control. So it's actually interesting that you asked me to kind of do some little recap on that, given where we're going today and what we're talking about and what's happening in our world right now. Yeah. And so I think it definitely plays in, because these kind of currents are coming up. They are happening. They're around us. And, it always shows opportunity. And also within this code pattern that you sent me, Jared, I believed I mentioned something probably about parallel timelines in it. And there is this aspect of parallel timelines, which is something that's big, that's happening in our world right now, where we're in this almost literal battle for timeline here for Earth. We have 1 foot in one foot in the other. It's like 1 foot is in the 5th dimension and 1 foot's in the 3rd dimension. And we got a tug of war going on between that. And the only way through any of this is going to be to get vertical. And when I say vertical, that means to come into soul alignment, to come into divine alignment. For those that have a more traditional religion, we would say God. But for those that have a more spiritual slant, it might be divine presence, divine alignment in there. But we're going to have to get vertical. And at times, we are going to be kind of like in this race for the timeline, to do it. But we're having a shift going on right now in timelines. And more people are coming over into that timeline that has the 5th dimensional energy on it. More and more people are making that choice to go over to that. They're getting very tired of what's happening here. They're very frustrated here. They're very worn out with what's happening in the 3D aspects. So we have one timeline that's going to create a lot of freedom. We have another timeline that is very much a misuse of power. So you have one that's a wise use of power and one that's a misuse of power that's going on right now. And there are times we're going to have to stand on our own on this process. We need to learn to be strong. We need to be to a point where we're learning to be accountable for ourselves. And self-accountability is a big part of moving into what many people might view in some ways a utopia. It's not quite the way I think a lot of humans think of utopia, but into that more 5th dimensional mindset. And so we have a lot of different components when we look at that code combination.
That's interesting, because one of the things that there's a session I did with my brother, and there's several things that have come up when we've done our investigations, and I think Rich, you backed me up on this, that have said something kind of similar. Now, one of the things that was interesting that kind of I wanted to ask you about with this, right, is when all this started to hit back in January, is one of the things that everyone was saying is, I thought we would have had more time. So did this happen sooner than it was anticipated? Did this kind of start to go? Because what it feels like at the moment, and I've been having these conversations with people, is it feels more like a mudslide. It feels like as one starts moving, the other starts coming, and then as you sort of start to get a handle on that, and another piece starts coming down, and it feels like it's literally like an avalanche in a sense. And we have been saying on this channel for years that the world has been on a knife edge. And if the world was on a knife edge like in 2016, now it is literally sort of hanging off the edge of the knife and sort of, legs dangling in the air over the abyss, wondering what the hell it's going to do with itself, whilst probably kicking someone else they don't like in the gonads. that's kind of, for me, I don't know why I felt that I needed to ask that question, but was this shift sort of supposed to happen now, or was it something is that something that your insights could tell you, or not? Because that's something that a lot of people just were saying to me around about that time, is we should have had more time.
Well, yes and no. We've actually had a lot of time, but people haven't been paying attention to that. They've been sitting back in a very relaxed way, a very not worrying about it kind of way. And so the big change time period, we've really just entered this year, 2020. And so we've had all these little drips going along the way. It's kind of like that little drip of water coming out of the dam. And now the dam's getting closer and closer to breaking here. And so what happens, too, is as people shift their mindset, and unfortunately, it takes a lot of drama and a lot of hard experiences for people to wake up and realize they need to be doing something. They need to get a little more proactive. They need to do it. And you'll actually hear a lot of people saying, hey, I never wanted to get into the politics end of something. I never wanted to do certain things, but I'm finding myself there, and there's various reasons behind it. Because their soul will not let them sit back, and that's part of what happened to me. I'm being thrust into this area of world events and politics and things like that really is not what I would have thought I would have been stepping into. And excuse me, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And yet here I am. And I realize now why I'm moving into this area, because the codes are about truth, and there's so much confusion, there's so much being thrown at people, that there has to be some sort of aspect for them to go to and say, what's really happening here? It's time, it's ready for them to open some of these deeper layers. Now, as we know, as people wake up, we are in a huge awakening right now. We're in a huge period of people no longer being able to just sit back and ignore it all anymore, because things have gotten so much in their face, so much right there on them, that they can't ignore it. They can't just run away from it or shut the door and pretend it doesn't exist anymore. This is not like other times in history or points in time that we've been through. So as people wake up, they move more and more into that fifth dimensional energy flow. They start to rethink things. They start to look at things. They start to become more aware. They're no longer sitting in 100% sleep state anymore. And as that happens, the more people that are waking up, the more people that are questioning things, the more people that are asking questions, the more people that are saying, I got to do something now, then the faster those timelines speed up. The faster everything starts to go. So it's kind of a perpetuating cycle there.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with my uncle yesterday, and he was saying, in the 60s you had the civil rights movement, and a few years later you had like the Hong Kong flu, or we had the Spanish flu in 1918, and then we had like the uprising. I think it was like in the 1920s in the UK. We had a period of like workers' uprisings, and then we had a period of the Great Depression, sort of surrounding that as well. He said we've had all that in about 6 weeks. We've had the lot. Things that it took last century a good decade to go through, we've had literally since January. Rich, do you want to chime in with anything?
Well, it's difficult at the moment, I think, for anybody to look at any platform where information is coming to us and actually form a true and resolute opinion of the situation at hand is going to be nigh on impossible. You're going to be criticized if you think differently, and I notice this with a lot of my friends. You're being criticized if you say that there's a different agenda. If you go along with the sheeple, then you sort of criticise there from other parties. And I think it just is, it's like this George Floyd incident. It's almost, and I've seen this, and we've seen this, Jazz, when we've done these shows over the past couple of years, that incidents happen, and the timing of them, I find suspicious at best. And, the timing of this George Floyd thing and the reaction of the people to it, when I've been watching videos for the last 20 years, from the media moving up to different platforms of things that I'm told that I'm supposed to believe. And, you look at, like, with the black communities in America and the ghettos and stuff, you're talking in some states, you might have 30 young men die a day. You might have, in gang warfare. And then you've got things like people being put in prison for 20 to 30 years for what they call misdemeanors, like cannabis or different things like that. And then you've got people who do worse crimes getting a slap on the wrist. And it's like the timing of these protests, I am at the moment finding very, very suspicious. And the reaction, you've seen the video I've shared on my Facebook today of this white gentleman with a gas mask walking up to the windows and smashing them with a hammer, and being confronted and being violent towards other protesters. It's just all. I think for myself, I'm finding it hard to believe anything at the minute that I'm seeing on any alternative. I'm finding it hard to just believe anything. So, from my point of view.
I have a ton that I can. I can hear you.
Yeah.
I have a ton that I can say about that, but before I actually jump into some of the pieces on George Floyd, because I think there's three aspects here.
Yeah.
There's what the codes are showing for the year that tie into what's happening right now in this situation. There are the codes that I think we'll find very, very interesting connected to George Floyd and that particular day in that particular town and how they connect up. And then we have some of the other additional layers that come into it. So I kind of would love to give an overview, if that's okay with you guys, of what the codes show during the year. And we can come back to some of those pieces maybe along the way with some more examples. But I wrote several things down. So in the codes on this year, it shows that there's a taste of what is to come. Now, this is really an interesting piece, right? A taste of what is to come, which means we're just opening up. What we're seeing right now, all this exposure stuff, is all this corruption that's coming out is kind of just the tip of the iceberg, really. And we've got a lot more to go through. And it shows if you support those aligned with terrorist groups, and this is actually right there in the code, terrorist groups, massive deaths, violence, and martial law. That, there's all of these things starting to surface. I want to come back to the martial law piece a little bit later. Because I can see where that could be implemented in some countries based on their structure and their government rule. It is something that's being pushed for, that some of the people have tried to push Trump to, but he will not do that. And there's reasons for that, but I'd rather come back to it. It talks about in the codes major transformation and shifts this year. Creates upheaval, rebellion from those wanting to keep power. One of the big players in all of this particular situation we're talking about today is Soros, and he's one of the last big sources of power that's coming down right now. And a lot of this will be coming out more. He has connections with Gates and the WHO. So you talk about timing, Richard. This comes right after Trump shut off funding to the WHO. Okay? And he's been working on removing money from the central bank system, getting that dissolved, and and Soros is also very, very angry at these collapsing power structures. All of his financial pieces are starting to collapse on him. So this is where some of that's coming from.
Yeah.
Must learn to come together. This is one of our big lessons right now. We've got to learn to come together, especially where there are ruthless plays for power. And we need to start embracing our differences. The codes warn of this over and over again. And I think situations like this, and as you hear the codes more directly related to George Floyd, that you're going to find that why this death became such a headliner in many ways, because there's a lot more to it that is involved in bigger soul processes. Learning what type of future we are creating and where we need to change directions. So a lot of people have just been going along with whatever has been in place, whatever the governments have been doing or anything else like that, and they haven't really been paying attention to what is getting created in those processes. And now it's starting to come out. Now it's starting to open up and show people, look, this is what's happening. This is what we're creating, and we need to start rethinking this. We need to start rethinking this whole division thing, this whole separation thing, and we need to come back around and get together on things. The codes talk about facing the truth, getting real, standing in truth and purity. These are all huge pieces playing into this. They talk about working together and that we're going to change the world by how we live. That's going to be the most important thing. Illusions being broken, lies, deception, manipulation. This incident is massive with them. Massive. Choosing freedom, uprisings, rebellion, revolution. So where freedom is squashed and there's unethical treatment, we're going to see these uprisings. What is not based in wisdom is going to crash in this process. Ending oppression is another big thing. This is another reason why this is coming out. We'll also talk more about those connections of why they're using the racism issue right now in this situation. And people are fed up with these games. You know, they're fed up with oppression. They're fed up with all of these different components. They're fed up with the division, and we're starting to see it through this incident where these groups have gotten away with things before. They've existed for a long time, the ones that are perpetuating the violence and that aspect in things. But we've never seen it on this scale because it's never been put into the media like this before. And that, of course, has its own connections. Now, specifically between April 25th and October 4th in this year's patterns, we have aspects of needing to look at what we're supporting. We have huge aspects coming forward regarding personal rights and justice being served. So when I look at this, these are pieces where sometimes we have to be exposed to the crimes that are actually committed before we can get justice served. Because a lot of people are walking around absolutely blind to these things happening every day. I think it was you, Richard, that mentioned that every day you could walk into a big city like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Tokyo, or wherever, these places, and there are dozens of these crimes happening every single day, and none of them hit the news. We have also a need to have to fight or defend ourselves and to watch out for those that want to be better than others. Resistance by those that don't want to change. We have in the codes need to take care of each other. We have lots of chaos and upheaval, breaking up the good old boys network. So a lot of this chaos and upheaval is a natural part of the rebuilding and the restructuring energy of this year. We have a lot of aspects of misuse of power that equal upheavals, and in the end, even though we have this tyranny going on in a lot of aspects, this is going to bring an end to the tyrant behavior. And we're seeing that through this incident. And then March 23rd through July 2nd, so a very active part that we're in also right now. Again, it comes back to the aspect of a taste of what is coming. So that means, now we got people that jump in and they have all these different perspectives. Well, this means that we're going to have militia forever and a day, or these different things. But actually, I think it's far bigger than that. I think it's not that we're going to have militia every day. I think, there's certain rulers that might want to go in that direction. I think if we were under different rulership than we are right now in our country, it would definitely go in that direction. There's certainly people that are trying to push that perspective, but what it's showing us really is that we are under radical change, period. And giving us a taste of what's coming means that we are going to be restructuring the rights. We are going to be restructuring these departments that have been corrupt. We are going to change the corruption out of the system. And can you ever 100% get it out of the system? No way. But we can get it to a point where it's manageable. We can get it to a point where it is not out of hand like it has been. As somebody said to me, well, this stuff has been going on for the last 50, 60, years. It's like, yeah, because that's how active this particular corruption grouping has been, because it's been that long since we've had anybody that was willing to stand up to this network of people, if you want to say that. So I'll take a break there, but I think that that's an interesting overview of what the codes are talking about. And for those that don't know the codes, as a Magi, that's my language of being able to take what is happening in the world, to take things through names and numbers and addresses and events and letters, and they translate into my own language, and I bring them back out into a book called The Code Journey, which is a daily guidebook to help people understand the currents of what's happening on a day-to-day basis, to understand the currents of what we're dealing with from year to year, and to be able to hopefully through that live a little more wisely, a little more compassionately with each other, and to realize, okay, this is a natural part of the influences right now, but we're going to have to, it's up to us what direction it's going to go. I mean, it's up to us what we do with what's happening, and are we going to use it for peaceful protest, for speaking our opinion, for making people aware, or are we going to go down these violent paths? And so I'll stop there for a minute.
Do you want to chime in with anything, Reg?
Well, yeah, I mean, if Trump stays in for another term, we might be lucky. But if you think about every aspect of society, where on TV we're shown people who have incredible wealth, they want for nothing, and then you see people who are at the opposite end of that spectrum, who have basically nothing, have to fight. They see the lawlessness, they see the corruption for what it is, because they're on the receiving end of the police brutality. They're on the receiving end of the neighborly brutality, of the culture they're from. And then, they have an opportunity, like in these riots, to maybe have the things that they have always been out of reach. And I think if you think about it on a real, give it a really good think, at the class divide. And I said this in a video when I was told I had COVID, I was very ill, and this class divide we've created in the world, where we strive for things, and you can see how people would want their children to strive and be well off and never be on that side of society, but in doing so, it makes that divide worse. And it's until we level up that system, I believe in my heart, until we level up that system and we stop this sort of class divide, especially like this situation with racism. I believe that one of our own, he was supposed to be a leader, Jeremy Corbyn. I believe, and no one will tell me differently, and I believe this firmly in my heart, the reason he lost his seat as Prime Minister of this country, a large majority of that was racism.
Yeah.
Because of his beliefs in immigration. Now, people see immigrants because I call them sheeple, because they look at the telly and they see a handful of people doing some radical things, right? And they tar everyone with that brush, right? And that's the thing. I think that's the thing. And with the media, until we, I know Trump wants to censor Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and he wants to get into that, which should have been done, I believe, a long time ago. It's going to be very difficult. Yeah, stop it. Stop the one-sided stories. And it's going to be very difficult to make people understand that these people are running. Yeah, you've got bad eggs everywhere. There are bad eggs everywhere, and because they've been neglected by society, because of their upbringing, because of because of the way society class has treated them, because they might have an addiction, because there's so many layers to the world that has been created. And for me, it goes back to the Romans. Even further, this society of government and ruling class that has always held a seat of power in this world. What do you expect to happen? When you get governments playing about with biological weapons and testing things and manipulating. What did anybody expect to happen? It's like nuclear power plants. It's everything. You can't, when stuff happens, it's no good going, I didn't see that coming.
But this is the thing, right? It's like the community I live in, right? And I think this is what you brought up is a really good point there. Is the last time people was this active was like the 60s. When you had like the civil rights movements ending in Martin Luther King getting shot. You had a president that was speaking up. He ended up getting offed. And you had all different sort of movements in that time. The anti-Vietnam stuff in the US. We had different things over in here in the UK, probably more in the 70s and 80s. And looking at the community I grew up in is an old mining community, and we were central. The pit in Mardy, which is about 5 miles away from where I live, and it's the pit my father used to work at, was central. And there's video on the BBC of the boys from Mardy pit going up to the one in Derby and saying, look, Maggie Thatcher is going to shut the coal industry down. And basically the miners' strike happened with the remaining pits in South Wales, pits like Penalta, pits like Mardy, places like Big Pit, and I can't remember the other one now that did Tower Colliery. But because that came to such a head, and it was literally the closest the UK had come to like a civil war situation, very, very reminiscent, I suppose, of what is actually happening in a sense on the streets of America now. What the danger is happening is if this doesn't go the right way, you're going to have communities that are literally defeated. And the mentality of the community of which I live in now is that there is never going to be anything in this community. This community is never going to have anything to offer. If you need a job, you get on a bus, or you get on a train, or you move out to the community and you go and work in Cardiff, or you go and work in Swansea, or you go and work in other parts of Wales. Whereas, back going back 40, 50 years, where I lived was the industrial centre of Wales, and that defeat had an effect on the community that reverberated for generations. It reverberated, because a lot of kids growing up, still seeing their fathers, because it was the fathers back in the 80s that primarily did work. I know mothers did work as well, but it was the fathers who lost their jobs, and not only lost their jobs, but they had no skills to retrain. So, like, literally finding other work was very difficult for them, and literally then you had like a defeated community. So I can see when you're saying it's two timelines, I can actually see that, because that is something that I find quite interesting. Now, and Trump, in a sense, in his character, is almost indicative of that, because one minute he's challenging the WHO, he's challenging social media tech giants, and the next minute he's coming out giving speeches in front of the US flag like some sort of Hitler, and marching down the street grabbing a Bible and having the most weirdest picture I've ever seen taken of a president this side of ever. What the hell is that all about? And even in his personality, you don't quite know which way he's going. Is he a good guy? Is he not? Is he just an idiot? Is he... You can't quite put a handle on the man. You can't quite... How he is today and how he is tomorrow. He's a bit like that annoying friend in the schoolyard. He's great with you one day, the next day he smacks you on the face and has a go at you just because he's having a bad day. What's the deal?
Well, and I think Trump is very, very confusing for people. I think there's a lot of stuff that is put out there about him that has not been true. There was, as a reference, there was a picture that was photoshopped, and it was made to make him look like Hitler. And this is part of this whole movement that is behind the riots that are going on right now, which, is so much bigger and part of their agenda. And again, there's so many layers on this. There's so many pieces on this that can be discussed. Is they will pick in this particular branch of what it is, and it actually, gets back into Soros, and I can make some of those connections of it where he is actively, recruited people.
Can I ask a question?
And
do you have any insight into that particular instant when he cleared the protesters' press? Well, this is how Channel 4 made it look. So whether it's different on the news over there, right? This is how Channel 4 made it look. Was he was giving the speech, and they would show in a side by side where there was peaceful protesters. Riot police came in and they literally beat the crap out of them, threw tear gas at them, and literally created anarchy. And he
false news.
That was like now that's one of the things that was claimed, because the guy there was two. I hate saying this, but there was two black representatives. There was a black guy representing Trump and a black guy representing Biden, and the black guy representing Trump was absolutely fuming. He was just like he was literally like gonna blow a gasket. But the way he's standing with that Bible looks weird as well. It's as if he's trying to send a message to someone.
Well, and this is where it gets confusing for people, because they wanted to make the Hitler connection. What he was actually signaling was that this event is connected to Soros, who actually does truly have Hitler connections to him. And in that aspect of what happened, it was many hours prior to walking over to that church. Attorney General Barr had told them to clear additional space around the church. And when he arrived, they had not cleared that space. They were supposed to clear another block or so distance because the church had been on fire the night before. There were reports that there was this tear gas thrown into helpless, defenseless, peaceful protesters, which was not the case. They had been given messages over speakerphones and everything to move the crowds. And so the crowds had not been moved. And when AG Barr showed up, the Attorney General Barr showed up, he was like, why is this not moved? And he made them go move everybody right away. And they were given warning. It was not tear gas. The police officers did not have the equipment to defend off tear gas that was being used. There were actually violence happening in that part, which they did not show. So, what it looked like, what it was, two really different things happening there. And so, but this is what happens, because when you've got the media who is being told what to do, coming down the channels through a few people, perhaps from Soros, but him having a very heavy hand in this, they're reporting the way they want it to look, and they want to give this presentation, because if they don't present Trump in that light, then the eyes come back on them. And there's already a lot of heat on Soros right now. The eyes come back on Soros. And so one of his main areas that Soros does is to collaborate these fake media events. He did it with a walking protest that would have meant people had walked barefoot 43 miles a day, carrying children and everything. I know professional trekkers that don't do 43 miles in a day. They bust these people in. They stage everything, and this is part of what I want to get into. But they do all of these pieces, and then they have the media set up ready to go. They give everybody their commands. They set them up with their tools, so to say, and we do have all of this conflict coming in, because again, people are being told one thing. The groups that are, even the activist groups, are being told one thing, and in order to engage them and get them enraged. Now, you've got Soros, who has flat out admitted in interviews, flat out came out and said, hey, I'm all about the money, and I don't care what happens to anybody in the process of that. You've got, I was just listening to that on a 2020 interview earlier today. You've got these pieces where he's not telling them what he's really doing or what he's really for.
No.
And these groups that he's recruiting, they don't even realize that they're supporting the very thing that they claim to be against.
Exactly, yeah.
And so here again, we have all of these layers that's going up. And so when Soros creates these events so that he can bring in and bring the attacks into places. Now, keep in mind that all the places that the attacks happen are all places that wanted everybody shut down and haven't been opening up completely. They were all places that have a high, and I don't like to think of things as party, because there's corruption on both sides, there's good people on both sides, but primarily very strong left-wing people. They're already set up to dismiss these people. Matter of fact, that was already also shown, that out of all these people that were arrested, 400 people that were arrested in the St. Louis area, that they were all released. And so they're already set up to release these people. Soros is already set up to pay the bail on things. There's all of these components that are already in place. And why do they do it? And these groups have come out and flat out said the reason we go to these areas is because they're not going to do anything to us. They don't pack guns like the Trump areas do. They don't, because if we go into an area where everybody's packing guns, they're just going to shoot us.
Yeah.
So, they pick these areas very, very specifically, but whenever it's a Soros event, it's always going to have something attached to it, such as racism, immigration, something along this line that says, oh, look at the poor people, look at these people, and they try to they recruit these people in on the spot. So it starts off as a peaceful protest, and then they go in and they actually infiltrate their groups, and even the groups that were there for peaceful protesting, to simply say, hey, all we want is justice. We want this to be served. and we want these guys held accountable, and everything was peaceful. And they're like, man, all of a sudden these buses show up and there's these people coming off, and now they're rioting and they're looting and they're doing all of these things, and that's not us. And these people are spray painting things, making, the people, black people or whatever, look bad.
Yeah.
They're making them look bad. They're destroying their communities. So these people who have fought for their businesses, they fought for every single piece in their life, are just being destroyed. And these people are claiming these are the people they're standing up for, but yet they're destroying them. So you see the conflicts that start to come up in here.
Yes.
And maybe I'm going to jump to this piece first and then come back to some of the code pieces, I guess, on Floyd with the way this is going. But let's take a look. They drop these pallets of bricks there and set them up. They staged the water bottles that were full of like gasoline and things like that so that they could set the fires. Now, let's take a look at the bricks that were dropped off at all of these places. They come from a company that is called, I know I wrote it down here. Was it the Acme Brick Company, which is owned by Berkshire Hathaway? And guess what? The chairman of that company is Warren Buffett. So we know Warren Buffett has this huge connection with George Soros.
Yeah.
And George Soros flat out has ads out there. And I can actually read one of the ads. They've been using Craigslist for a lot of ads, but he's had some other ones out there. Stop Trump, up to $1,500 a week, hiring immediately. Call today, start tomorrow. $15 to $18 hourly rate, plus bonus, plus overtime, up to 77 hours per week. Drivers earn gas reimbursement, morning and evening shifts, no previous experience required, full-time and part-time positions, weekend positions available, no fundraising, no commission. I mean, it's just all right there. And
can you send something to that later after the show? We'll put that up.
You can actually, you can actually just go in and pull it up through images from a search, and you'll find the ads there.
Right, okay.
And with the post IDs on them and everything. These are the things that people don't realize. These looters and these rioters are given bonuses for if they break a window. Let's take a look at one of the first stores that they showed in there was Target, for example. Target was a big store that was put in there, and I know I had some different pieces about that. Yeah, actually owned by, where did I put it? Actually, Soros has his hands in Target. He actually, there's a lot of globalist connections in there. So, I mean, it's just insane as you start to go into these pieces.
He's smashing his own stores.
In a sense, he's smashing his own stores, same like attacking CNN. But why are they doing this? Because these companies, when you attack your own stores, they're not going to press charges on you. If you go attack somebody else's store, they're going to press charges on you, right?
Yeah.
And so, plus they can control all of the stuff. Plus then it comes right back out of the Open Society Foundation, which is where people allegedly are being paid from. And so, I mean, it's all connected in there. So these things, is it any question that it comes after Trump cuts off the funding to who, which, again, we know the connections are there, and it's there. And why does Trump, call these groups? Again, I think these groups, Antifa believes in violence, and they're not the only group. Black Lives Matter, things like this. They started off, some of these, as very good groups. They started off, and Black Lives Matter is one of those, with a legitimate cause, a legitimate purpose, they were not a violent group by any means. And then you had Antifa members coming in and infiltrating that. And we now know that both Black Lives Matter and Antifa and several of the other groups are funded by George Soros. So you keep coming back to this common link. And again, he doesn't want things opened up. He's already seen things being opened up on Obama, on the Clintons, on, through the Flynn investigation, through all of these things. He's already seen it. And Trump has already cut off, and pretty much dropped down the Rothschilds, and this is why he's such a threat. It has nothing, he's not a dictator. He's not a Nazi guy. He's going after the ones that are that way. So you see how they twist and they turn everything around. They deflect it. They use these mirrors. They turn it all around in these different pieces. So they know that racism is hot. They know that these areas are hot. And I just wish these groups that are coming out fighting so hard could see that the people that they're taking their information from are the people that they claim to be fighting against. That elite section is the very person that's funding them. I wish they could see that the person that they're trying to go up against is the one person that's trying to fight for the rights right now, is trying to dissolve this. He's trying to get us out of the globalism and the communism models and to get us back into these pieces. But I do want to discuss, too, a little bit, and I'm going to take a break so you guys can get some words in here. But I do also want to, again, delve a bit more into the codes with George Floyd and why this issue, why this way, and what was around these particular cops coming into this situation. Because this opens, again, enormous layers. And Richard, as you mentioned, most people have no idea we're all in slavery right now. And that's one of those areas we need to come together, because we're all in slavery to the elite right now, which we are working on getting out of. But people do not understand what this culture of people have been through. They don't have a clue in most cases. I have some awarenesses. Jesse worked with a lot of people of different ethnicities. I wish we had more classes that were based in multicultural studies where people could understand and learn this. But when you take a look, and Jessie was, she was a person that she experienced it. She got cut out of jobs because she was Caucasian. She got cut out of jobs, for different ethnicities and things like that. But she never held a resentment of that. Her grandfather would take people in and give them a meal even when they had almost no place to go because they were traveling and they were weary. And he never asked, do you have a criminal record or anything like that? He didn't care. He just saw them as people and somebody who needed something as they were passing through. And it just amazes me. But these people have had to fight for everything. They have been through so much that most people cannot even conceive about. And you look at giving them some shamble token neighborhood to work with, and they might have 3 or 4 neighborhoods like that compared to 50 white neighborhoods. I mean, you tell me, as a white person, you go down and you walk into a black neighborhood and you try to go walk into a soul restaurant and you tell me how comfortable you feel. Yeah. When you're the only white person in there and you live that day by day, when you don't have the opportunities, when you don't have the resources to go get an education, when you don't have these things that so many of us take for granted every single day, when you are a mother and that child walks out your door and out of 4 or 5 kids that you might get 2 of them to adulthood, and you might, out of those 2, you may or may not have one that can do anything because of the structure and the culture of the drugs, of the different gangs, of these different things that are innate into the areas where they live. Mm-hmm. and I'm going to stop there and then I'll come back because it just there's so many layers.
Yeah, that's the thing, and I think that, you know, for me personally, you know, when I'm looking at this, that's the complexities that are coming up in the conversations that we are having just in the household, and, you know, in my household, and I'm having on the phone with Richard and with others sort of around me is looking at that, as you say, those layers and the deep sort of the deepness to it. The point I wanted to bring up as well is we've seen this with there's a gentleman. He's been a bit unwell as of late, but he's been an absolute shining beacon of light in the UK. A very much an unsung hero, a gentleman by the name of Ian Crane, who I would say, I can imagine that Ian would probably disagree with this statement, but tough. That he is probably single-handedly responsible for sparking the fracking movement, the anti-fracking movement in the UK. And what he would say on several occasions is, if you have organisations, and these organisations can have the best intent in the world, but if they have a structure, that structure can be infiltrated. It's only when people themselves actually step up and do their own research and come together in groups, almost informal groups, then, where there's no structure, you muck in, you do what needs to be done, that kind of thing. And this is the thing with most people who peacefully protest know that you go on a march to raise awareness of what it is that you're trying to raise awareness of. But that is not the first part, you know, that's not the be-all and end-all of the process. A lot of the process we would solve these issues, like you said, if we came together and literally just said no. That's all we have to do, is to say no. And that's the anti-fracking protests in the UK proved it. Yeah, we had a few lockdowns. We had a couple of boys go up on a rig and kind of, you know, film themselves for 3 days up there, which was magnificent viewing on Facebook. You know, it really showed how endemic violence is in these institutions. You know, even you know, you're looking at the police in those protests ragging people about in wheelchairs, and it was horrifying. And you could see in any institution. I've been personally seeing the corruption in the Welsh government. I've personally seen corruption in the Welsh police force. I've seen good things in both those institutions as well, mind. So I'm not just gonna, you know, I'm not gonna sort of tarnish them. As I've seen good things in both of them. I've seen police officers, for example, in our local area, that, you know, have taken it upon themselves to work with disadvantaged kids, to actually, you know, just do it through like things like sport and to empower them and that sort of thing, and take a real interest in their lives. So that, but there are those that do it, but it's what seems an increasing majority, especially since we've been privatising these services a lot more, especially in the UK now. You know, with companies like G4S and private security. You know, we had during like the protests in the north of England in Kirby Misperton, people getting run over just because they happened to be walking on the wrong side, you know, the wrong side of the area. These companies tried to stop protests through injunctions. They tried to circumvent democracy. You'd have councils, our local councils would say, no, we don't want it in our area, and the government would just step in. And anyone that thought that we were living in a democracy before, you know, I would say any time in the last decade, especially sort of after 2010, I think needed to examine their point of view slightly. And anyone who believes we're living in a democracy now is, well, they call me insane for the stuff that me and Richard look into. I don't know what else to say to that, because literally we've just had with the UK, it's been kind of like, it's almost been kind of, we're quite blasé in the UK, aren't we, Rich? And it's infuriating, but our establishment's just kind of hung itself.
Yeah, we are. I think in the UK, what I can tell of it is some people need a little bit of drama, right? You know, they need a little bit of gossip, they need a little bit of drama, and anything beyond that realm of understanding is like they just can't comprehend that anybody could manipulate them that much. They could be that naive.
Yeah.
And I found that a lot over the years. Yeah, you know, it's like the story I've told on here about the coloured lady who brought up her son's killer, literally saved his life, brought him out of prison. You know, they've changed that narrative, and I'm not joking, it's on Facebook, to a white woman, right? They portray it as a white woman with a white son, and you just think, why, you know, that just, if that's not enough to tell you there's something wrong in our society, that the real story won't appeal to certain people, you know, it's like I said, there's so much. It's like the Boston bombings, right? How that came about and was like almost eradicated.
I want to say one thing,
yeah.
Sorry, and as for the chat, and I want to know if anyone guessed that. When you said about that story being changed, I wonder if anyone guessed the reference of Benny Russell and Far Beyond the Stars, which was basically that story. It's from a particular show, and it's probably one of the best episodes of that particular show. But I want to know if anyone guessed that, because it's one of the most poignant racist. If anyone wants, like, if you want to illustrate that point and you want someone to understand it and not go through what we look through, Benny Russell, Far Beyond the Stars. And if you know what that is in the chat, I will let you all know by the end of the show. Carry on, Rich. Sorry.
Right. It's you know, I completely forgot what I was going in.
You were saying the Boston bombings.
The Boston bombings, right? Now, that was so just taken out of the societal mind because people were like, there's something wrong with this, right? It's like this. We have the 7/7 bombings, right, which are on my birthday, so it's not a thing I'm going to forget. And it's the same with that narrative. And, you know, you have so many incidents that happen, like Theresa May's done something, and then the next thing you know, you've got a terrorist attack. And then all of a sudden, this terrorism seems to be a thing of the past. And then all of a sudden, somebody starts to poke a finger or starts to look up an agenda or starts to question something. Before you know it, there's an attack of some kind, or there's something that happens. It's the same with all the riots that were happening around the world. All of a sudden, there's COVID-19, which is turning into the biggest joke. It's almost. It would almost be less surreal if the governments of all the world come out when April Fools. You know, it would be that you go, you know what I mean? Yeah, there's no everybody that died just died. You know, you'd find it less of a thing than what it's becoming. You know, so yeah, it's so many. When I saw this George Floyd, like I said, when I saw this George Floyd thing, I just thought to myself, really. You know, people, the way they manipulated people's reaction to it, by any stretch of the imagination, is terrifying.
Well, and you've got these pieces where they have to keep people divided, because the only way they can have any sense of control is to keep people fighting among themselves. And the second we become united, and this is their greatest fear, is that we actually unite, that we actually come together, we work together, and you see the white people standing next to the black people, next to the Asians, next to the Mexicans, and so on and so forth, through all the cultures, standing together, united against only those that seek to separate them and divide them and conquer them, and to to hold this rule and this control. And it comes back to one of the pieces from Source. The reason we choose this particular culture, the Black culture, is because they are so emotionally charged. And you've got so many layers in that, right? Because we know that fear, we know that aspect, that passion, that emotion really makes a huge difference. But we have to definitely keep in mind that the looters and the rioters are completely separate from those that have gone out to protest, from those that go out wanting to get their voice heard, wanting to get something said. Because the people that simply want their voice heard are not doing the looting and the rioting. The only people that are doing the looting and the rioting are the people who have been paid, who have all their tools staged for them. And most of those people, you have to say, if you weren't getting paid $20 an hour plus bonuses, would you be out there? No. Most of those people would not. They would be either standing in peaceful protest or they wouldn't be there at all. And, even the family has come out. The mother of George Floyd's daughter came out, and it's like, they don't want all of this violence. And when you really get down to the culture that's being targeted for this, here they are. They're not only being taken advantage of as being recruited into these things, which many of them are coming out of it now, and they're speaking up and they're saying, this is not okay, and this is not our culture, and this is, not what we need to be putting our energy into. And they're stepping back and they're saying, look, these people that are doing this are not us. They're not from our culture. They're white. They're, they're not us. And yet, here again, they want it portrayed that that's who's doing it. And I think, fortunately, most people in the world are smart enough to say it is not their population that is doing it. They just wanted to come out and make sure that justice got served in this situation. And, we have to consider why this issue, why this big thing in here. And, police brutality now, when you start to get into it, and again, we know that all of these forces are being cleaned up right now here in the States. There's been a lot of infiltration. And we know that we have some really, really incredible cops. And we've seen it. The cops go out. They're walking with the people. They're, working with them. They're, their hearts are gigantic and their hearts are pouring out and they're breaking down and they're crying over what is happening in their cities and their towns and things like that. And they're standing right there with the families. They're standing right there with the people that are trying to get their voice heard. But you also have some very nasty cops out there. And Jesse had a few friends in the police area, and it wasn't a pretty sight. It was, there's always kind of been this dynamic, even in the departments, of good cop versus bad cop, good department versus bad department type of thing. And, so I have that insight knowledge in a way that, again, this type of thing happens so often in the departments. Unfortunately, they have their people planted. It's called infiltration. And they have their people planted in the departments to carry out these things, to train people. And if we go and we look, for example, in this particular situation of what was going on, and we had 4 officers involved, there's questions about the one main officer, in all honesty, because first of all, he had 18 complaints against him, including fatal shootings for police brutality. And they never pressed charges on him in 8 years on these types of things. So first of all, you have to say, why did the senator never press charges? Why did the senator never do anything in 8 years with this person? Second of all, if you get down and you really look at the photos of the person who was arrested, or that they showed an arrest photo of, and the person who's actually in the video committing the crime, there's a great amount of question as to whether they're even the same person, which then lends to the fact of, because of the way the badge was on the officer that was taking this act, it lends to the fact of, was that actually that officer? Did he lend his uniform to somebody? Was it not the officer that actually got arrested? I mean, there's some open-ended questions in there. But, like where Jesse grew up, this police brutality was common, not in her exact town, but it was common. And people don't get how common this is. And this is where part of the rage comes from, where these cops have gotten away from things. And again, no, not every cop is like this. If you take it, I would say the bulk of the cops out there are good people. They went into it to uphold justice. But you've got these little pockets. You've got these little pockets that are not good, and they get away with things. And you look at not only him, but you look at, and that was Derek Chauvin, by the way, who was the officer that was the main focus of everything. But then you have, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this name correctly, so forgive me if I don't get it right, Tao Thao, who was the Asian officer that was there. And he had been laid off for 2 years for an excessive force lawsuit and had recently come back on. And then the other two officers, Thomas Lane and Alexander Kung, were brand new as of 2019. So they didn't have a history yet, but they were obviously being trained by these other two officers. And you have to ask yourself some of the questions in this, and then I'll stop, and then I'll get into some more things. But you have to ask yourselves questions of, if this whole incident was over a $20 counterfeit bill, which I'm guessing, based on what I see in the codes with Floyd and what I understand about him, he may not have even known that was a counterfeit bill. And
I don't think he did.
I don't think he did. I think it was passed off to him through a payment that he received from somebody for some work he did. And I don't even think he knew it was fake. I think he was set up in this case. And I think that in this situation, let's say that's the case. Even if it was true, okay, so you've got somebody passing a $20 counterfeit bill. Why would you need to send 4 officers to that scene? There'd be no reason that you'd need to send more than 2 officers as a partnership to handle that situation. Why? How can somebody resist arrest when they're already handcuffed and not kicking, not doing anything, sitting on the ground? How can they be resisting arrest? Yeah. Oh, there's so many questions in here. And out of every police officer that was issued to this site, why this police officer? Why this set of 4 that has this history? And it turns out, we know there was a connection. We don't know all about the relationship, but we do know that there was a connection of Floyd and Chauvin working at the same place at one point. And so it is suspected that they knew each other. It is suspected that they probably had a previous relationship. My guess is that relationship wasn't necessarily great in the past. And when you've got somebody like Chauvin, their whole point is to destroy everything with spirit. Their whole point is to break down any divine connection, anything that represents Christ consciousness, anything that is vertical. They are directly enforced to keep that third dimensional fear. They're directly focused. And when you've got that many complaints upon you, that's inexcusable. And that should never have been the officers issued to this scene. There's too many things that say this was a setup. There's too many things there.
Well, I watched the video, and in my heart, I believe that I'd say officer. When I looked at his military footwear, I thought to myself, but he leans on that man's neck for him to die.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can explain it. The coldness on that guy's face, and he just continues to lean on that guy's neck, even when Floyd is non-responsive. I think there's something fishy about it. I think he leant on him to kill him. I think he knew where to lean on him. I think it was done purposely. He has his hands in such a relaxed manner, and it's something that is so callous and cold. And the people who stood just filmed it. Sorry, it's making me. It's winding me up. It is. I can't really. The people who stood there and filmed it, and I don't know. I mean, it says a lot about the man's character that he didn't even fight, and he was feeling like he was being suffocated. Now, a human reaction to being suffocated is to fight. You don't just give in to that. You don't just. It's not something you surrender to. And yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I've looked at it, and there's something so sus, and unfortunately, and the media showed it. So you would have thought the people watching it would have cottoned on to the fact that it was sus. And it's so horrific for a man of his standing to have his life taken like that. I think it's just by design. I can't see anything other than it's so horrific. It's so callous and cold and cruel that
and the way
it was going to spark something.
Repeated. The way it's constantly
it's
being
constantly
repeated.
being.
And it's just it's almost desensitizing people. It's
yes, you're right, Jared.
I can't. I've watched part of the video. I can't watch it all, because I just can't. I can't. It's too upsetting, and it's just that. I live in a, I literally sit and work here and wake up and think, I live in a world where that's allowed to happen. Like, what the actual fuck? I don't like to swear, but genuinely, I don't know I don't know another way to put it. I don't.
Well, and you've got to look at these officers that stood by. This one that already also had the excessive force suit on him, and had been laid off for 2 years. And he just stood by grinning and basically laughing at what was happening, knowing exactly what was going down. You got 3 officers that could have pulled Chauvin off of the guy, but they weren't, because they were training these other 2 officers in doing these things. And, they did bump the charge up to 2nd-degree murder, and honestly, it's not enough. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think it's enough.
No.
And because of the nature of this, because it was planned, because it had these additional pieces behind it, because it was a setup, because none of this needed to happen. And when you look at the cause of death, which is traumatic asphyxia,
yeah,
in codes,
they have to get independently verified, because the official thing actually exonerated the police officer, if I remember correctly. They had to pay for an independent autopsy, did they not? Or was there something?
I think there was an independent one, because at one point they said that's what it was. Then at another point they came back and said, no, it wasn't that. We have to keep in mind that George Floyd also had hypertensive heart disease, coronary artery disease. So he had some of these other things. He did have alcohol in his system. Not a big deal, really, right? Because, how many of us don't go out and have a drink once in a while or something like that?
Yeah.
So, some of that like those pieces don't concern me as much, other than this Derek Chauvin knew of health issues. He knew him well enough to know of these things. He knew him well enough to know how he would pin him down, and what would create the situation. In codes, when we look at the codes of traumatic asphyxia, it's actually codes up to assassination. So, another thing that tells me this is not, you can't go through that type of a death without it being intentional. You can't go through it without it. This was flat out a hit. No way around it. And it was a hit because somewhere George Floyd was starting to get a little piece of success come up in his life. Somewhere he was doing something, and he was getting some sort of recognition that Shaman never got through this stuff. And of course, this place that they both worked together, Chauvin was actually, I think, fired, if I'm correct. I'm not 100% on that. He was either let go or fired or something of that nature. And, so Floyd was very well liked, very, a lot of people appreciated him and his way of handling things. And, so that also, I can tell in the codes there's this sort of rivalry there that has gone on between them. There's a sort of aspect that, again, I mean, Chauvin's whole code pattern is about destroying spirit. It's about destroying God energy. It's about creating hardship and trauma. And, when you combine that with George Floyd's codes, you literally get damages. And I think somewhere Floyd was getting work that Shaman felt he should have had. He was, kept on when Shaman was released. So I think that there's definitely this aspect that, was there within Shaman. And it just, to me, there's just no, there's no thing. George Floyd, when we look at the codes of George Floyd, George is one of those people that oftentimes may have been made to look as if he was materialistic, but he wasn't. He was actually very, very different from that. And he's a person that has experienced a lot of, throughout his life, experienced a lot of bullying, a lot of picking on, a lot of struggles financially, and yet he still didn't walk down, the super dark paths that he could have walked down in his life. And he had this aspect of wisdom. He had aspects of knowledge. He had leadership codes and his in his name and in his code energy pattern. And those are the things that bring up change. He is a person that couldn't be bought. And we know that Chauvin very much could be bought. And when you have somebody that can't be bought and they're in the same setting as somebody who can be and who is very much that way, they will often go after and attack the person who can't be bought because they don't want him around, because they know that person's going to come out with the truth. They know that person has a conscience. They don't have control over him, so they become a danger and a threat to them, to the person that is one that will take money and take acceptance. And so, when you put these pieces together and you have the method of death with George Floyd, and you put those two code patterns together, you have what we kind of refer to as black magic energy or dark energy. And we have the snake oil things, being told one thing and getting something else. So we have creative energy that is literally being suffocated. And we know the creative energy also has the divine spark energy to it. So these are pieces. When we put together the aspects of the date and the city and Chauvin and Floyd all together, we literally come together with an aspect of some facet becoming too kind, too abundant, and that becoming destroyed, abundance being destroyed in there. And so Floyd has this huge representation, and I'll take a break, but I really want to also get into a little bit of sharing about the codes for that particular day, and to actually read from the code journey what the codes have to say about that day of George Floyd. And I think that will open some additional insights to why this death has a bigger meaning to it.
I'm happy for you to continue. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to ask, Richard.
No, I'm just listening. I think when it comes to like the right, you're gonna have opportunists. I think in regards to the riots. I seen a video where they were trying to defend jewelers, and these black men had turned up, and they couldn't understand why they couldn't loot the jewelers. And the people who own the jewelers are turned up with guns, and I think you're gonna have people on the other side of society who are going to see this as opportunity, maybe gain something. They're going to see it happened in London a few years back, that people, stole thousands and thousands of millions of pounds worth of stuff from shops and things like that. And it just sort of adds fuel to that fire, where they're going to see those people as it's almost creating more of a divide, and I can't understand how people can't see it. I just don't understand. It's the one thing you don't want. You want them, you want to create the solidarity, and you want to create the community, and and stand next to shoulder, and it's.
But in another way, though, Rich, right? If you look at the amount of people that are commenting on this or seeing it, right? In some ways, it is beginning to light a spark of bringing people together, because people are actually seeing it and question it, just like they were questioning everything else that's happening. There's more and more people that actually question it. So, in a sense, this is. I want to refer very briefly to what you said, Anna, the last time that we had one of these shows, where you said that there's going to be a pushback, because we said we felt there was going to be something else that was going to happen, and you said, yeah, absolutely there is, because there's going to be a pushback. We also said about we've also got it in the live stream, in the sessions I've done recently. I think it's the Rose Ike video that's on this channel, where I asked about it, or the one after that, message from the Council of 12, where it basically says the next thing you're going to see is you're going to see things starting to riot. I don't know whether or not, I'll have to look over those again, and maybe I think that could be worth something going through for us at a later point in time, is going through these predictions and seeing what has actually manifested now. And I don't think this is the end. I don't know whether this will simmer down a bit and something else then is gonna, but this feels like this is, there's gonna be other things as well that are gonna come out from this. But what I think is happening is, as this snowball is coming downhill, it's asking, more and more people are asking questions, and it's like when I'm having people now, for example, that have said things about the protests that happened against the lockdown in London. I'm still seeing those people, almost being shaken out of that place that they were in, and sometimes even having my back when I've had other conversations, and I've found myself in a little bit of hot water when I'm trying to sort of have a constructive conversation with people who just don't want to see what's happening in the world. And I think this is where you've like what Anne said about the two timelines. I think for us and people like us, people who are sensitive, people who are gone through this sort of awakening process, what we need to be doing is standing on the precipice of that, looking at the two timelines sort of coming in as rivers and sort of seeing, right, which way is that taking us, and which way is that taking us, and which way is that taking us, and seeing where the evidence actually ends up leading. You know, all we can do really at the moment, whilst this protest is going on, is be there handing out first aid kits. You know, and because I think this is a process that people need to go through themselves, just like we went through it.
You know, and people will have to come into this awakening, and I think on one side the good thing is that with every one of these events that are happening, people are waking up more. They're saying, hey, this doesn't add up. It's no longer this random thing anymore. We are starting to realize these things are being hijacked. We're starting to realize that we're not going to play into this, and we're not going to argue, and we're not going to fight, and we are going to stand together, and we are going to do it. When we look at the codes of peaceful protest have an impact on every existence. Peaceful protests bring abundance. They bring victory through wisdom and through understanding. Yeah. So I think that's very, very important. So when we talk peaceful protests, these are really, really valuable things. These are about freedom. These are about changing what is incorrect in our system. These things are about making a difference in things. And interestingly enough, the peaceful protest started on a code pattern that was all about love, unconditional love, and peace, which means that when I see something start, you know, when something starts or when a life ends, these are important markers to what happens for a soul, what is going to happen in that cause, what is behind it, and how it's going to play out. So I do believe that in the end, regardless of the riots, regardless of the looting, that we are going to see a victory for George Floyd. We are going to see a victory for this cause, for this purpose, and that there will be positive results that come out of this. And I get that that can be really hard to see, but this is going to be a huge catalyst for change. And when we look at what happens with these different groups that are infiltrating in and that are being paid by these bigger funders out there, that energy of hijack or being hijacked, and hijack is all about death. So anything that gets that has gone through a hijack process is meant to kill it. When you hijack something, that's meant to kill it. It's meant to put an end to it, completely, a final end to it, no less. When it is hijacked in the past tense, that is about preventing people from learning from the past. So in a situation like this, when we apply it to this type of a racist situation, it really is about trying to prevent people from learning about racism, and it's trying to prevent people to learn from the past errors that we've had in cultures and societies of what we've done, and to keep that wisdom hidden. Now, the very interesting piece in here, you heard me talk about some of George Floyd's codes, and he had very challenging codes, and I can relate exactly, and maybe part of why I understand who he was about so much is because my human codes and Jesse's human codes are the same overall. Our different components, pieces are different, but the overall codes for George Floyd and my human self are the same. So I do understand from a very much firsthand aspect how his life was and how he would try to do anything to create a better life for the people in his life, and how He really was a person that was not going to be pushed around or to forced into things, and yet repeatedly found himself in situations grasping to survive, grasping to be able to make it, to be able to be okay, to have to take a job someplace that maybe he didn't want to work, or that maybe he didn't even tell everybody he was doing. And, you know, in order to provide for people, to provide for his daughter, to provide for his family. You know, this person was really a very gentle soul. And the fact that he wasn't overcome by materialism, but the reality of it is that in this code pattern, we tend to draw in people who are heavily materialistic, and we tend to draw in situations that are so materialistically consuming that they come in and they come into lives like ours and like George Floyd's to overwhelm the soul or the spirit by materialism, and to say, see, you can't live without me. See, you can't live without playing into the system. These types of things. It's a hard code pattern to be on in life, and yet it's one that will have a lot of impact on a lot of people. Now, the particular day that he passed, we again had code patterns of death. And in Minneapolis, Minnesota, there is natural rebellion energy in the code patterns for that city. And it comes out of a stem for being able to see what is needed and to know where things are breaking down. And so you have a city who's naturally coded to rebellion energy, fighting energy, purpose and cause energy. And then you've got a date that is about completion, it's about finality, it's about death, and it is about transcendence, and it is about these different pieces. Now, that particular day, as it coincides with George Floyd's codes, shows that he passed through wisdom. His passing represented a completion of lessons for his soul, for him personally. So he passed in wisdom. He passed, and his, I would say, a sacrifice of his own life in order to bring a more favorable future into this world, in order to create abundance for his people, in order to create a better way of living in our entire world. And this is why, Richard, this death is getting recognized. There are so many pieces that are coming together with the codes, with the agendas, with all these different things playing out. And I have a feeling that many police stations are going to be seeing changes anywhere that we start seeing corrupt things, because he, in his death, in his sacrifice of his life, brought forth an abundance for us on earth as souls, as a collective, as a human race, that you can't put a price on, that can't be bought. So let me read the codes for this particular day, because this codes for that particular day, beyond the death energy that was present. So you had all these culmination of pieces coming together. It talks about the transformation. And this is where I think we're going to see the power and why this is touching so many hearts for him, and why this death here, really more of the transformation piece that it's connected to. So on this, these are the codes for May 25th, 2020.
And this is from your book, The Code Journey, yeah?
Yes, from my book, The Code Journey. Right. I can hold that up for people.
Yeah.
It looks like this. I put out a new edition.
Brilliant.
Every single year. It talks about these things. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, it showed these components all being present right now. It shows us being in these times of needing to stand up.
What's that, Jess?
Are you still reading it?
No, I've read quite a bit of it, but I haven't got all the way through it because there's been other things coming up, and it's it's just you read one thing, and then I go on to another thing, and then by the time I've got to that, I'm thinking, what did I start with? So I'm a nightmare for that. So
sorry, Anne, if you want to carry on.
Yeah, no problem. So I just want to read this because I think it's such a powerful piece to all of this. The codes are asking us to transform things in our life. Today we are asked to step out of our comfort zone and to become an inspirational leader for others. And I want to pause there for a second because we know in George Floyd's codes, it shows that he has that inspirational leadership in his codes. I am not talking about changing your whole life to go out and give speeches, although that is well favored in this energy pattern today. If you want to do it, since speaking and writing and sharing insights in large and small venues are quite favored. No matter where we are in life or what position we hold or the work that we do, we can be an inspirational leader for others. This comes from transforming our own life through experiences and embracing a life that provides us with greater freedom and self-sufficiency in the world. It is finding harmony and the joy in the simple things in nature and realizing there is a preference for qualities and values over material items and things. Again, that is heavily in his codes. His codes are so aligned on this day. It is an aspect of living in a way that does not judge. I think that let me repeat that. It is an aspect of living in a way that does not judge, and we need to take that piece away from us. But is able to see the assets in each person and thing and to bring them into a working and hospitable flow with each other. In most teachings, the joy of living on earth and fully living in the soul self comes from transcending the illusions and disillusionment. Again, I have to pause there for a second because we have these huge illusions that all police officers are kind and good, and he's breaking the illusions. He's breaking open the disillusionment in his sacrifice. It is a process of where we start with awe of everything, running on what we have been programmed to believe. Then we learn the lies and truths of those programs and all of things which can lead us into challenging and dark spaces, challenged and disappointed with what we see. Then we move into seeing the beauty of all things, whether we like them or not. It is in this space that we see their true purpose and value. And this is in everyone and everything. It is when we transcend our challenges and find happiness anyways that we become an inspirational leader. There are many inspirational leaders that have never been through real life challenges. And I say inspirational leaders in that sense with quotation marks. Oftentimes, the greatest leaders are those that no one has heard about, but the way they live their life influences and changes the lives of many. They have learned to stop focusing on what is wrong and to find the beauty and be in the beauty without being ignorant to the unpleasant aspects of something. It has learned to find the joy even in what it doesn't like. There is no fight, rebellion, or judgment, only recognition of its true divine value. This is a good time to take a look at those that are truly happy in life and not just those that appear to be. Take the time to consider who has been an inspirational leader for you in your life and how can you open to being that for others. It's just so spot on. It's just so point on when we are talking about George Floyd. Nobody really knew him prior to this. That officer appeared to be a happy person, and he was not a happy person in his life. He has major issues going on in his life. George was transforming things, and I have no doubt that he knew when this went down that he was fulfilling something bigger. I have no doubt that he impacted so many lives, and we heard about this. And it is through his deaths that the peaceful protest opened up, and then the rioting, and then the looting. And that is breaking us open to the truths of the programming. And that it's all right there in those codes. Every piece of it is in there. Every piece of it shows what a leader he was. Every piece of it is showing how his death is not just an ordinary death. And it was an assassin. It was a sacrifice. And he was having an impact that was making a dent on the materialism energy and moving more and more people into that 5D timeline. He was a person that was loved because of the way he was, because of the way he lived his life, and regardless of how many challenges he faced, how many things came up in his life, regardless of all of that, I bet you can go and ask anybody, whether it's his family, the mother of his child, or anybody that he knew, that he continued to carry a positive attitude no matter what hit him in the face.
Yeah, I'm a bit. It's interesting, Rich, how you spotted that first before Anne even said anything.
Yeah. I mean, I find it difficult, in the sense of like self-sacrifice on that level. Just because a man like that deserved to live in the world he may or may not have achieved through his passing. And I believe, I believe it in my soul that he deserved to live in a better world. And a lot of people do, and you know, most good people do. I'm not talking about the people, you know, because you've already seen it with lockdown easing in the UK. People have gone out and just made absolute disgusting, disgraceful mess of beauty spots and beaches. And what about the real people who make a difference in the world, who want to see the future progress and want to see a better world? Like George, probably in his life, and the way I saw him act in that video, and how upset he was by being, you know, apprehended by the police and everything. I just think it's a bit. It's just a shame that he won't get to see, you know, and I believe it in my heart that he would be really unhappy with the circumstances after his passing. I believe that what his brother is saying and what his family is saying, that he wouldn't have wanted rioting. You know, he wouldn't have wanted to see this divide, but it's just, I don't know. It's hard, isn't it? It's just hard to think that, you know, he will not get to see something he may create. It's a bit of a shame in that sense to live it, you know, to see, you know, he's going to miss out, you know, on so much because of somebody else's bullshit, like that officer, you know, and you know, when you put on a uniform, I put on a uniform over the years. And I've seen how a uniform can give people a bit of an ego and, you know, a bit of a power trip. And, you know, it's you know, you can see how it can, with that type of personality, be quite dangerous. And there's not enough screening. You know, you look at the door industry over here, like, you know, back in the day, used to take someone on the back and give them a good hiding, you know, and then they brought up the SAA license, and I was supposed to wean that kind of mentality out. And, you know, for me, there's nothing wrong with the good. As I see it, there's nothing wrong with you. If you want to go wrong, have a good punch up. But when it's non-consensual and you're being a bully and you're twice the size of a person, it should become something else. And you know, I don't know. It's just that reading that out then on I don't know. That was kind of a bit. That was a bit ball busting for me. That was because this is weighed. Seeing this is weighed heavy on me. I got to be honest. It's all. That's what I said earlier. It's all starting to weigh a little bit heavy on me. You know, they're on about reopening schools now at the end of this month, and you know, and they're on about this.
They're not going back to Parliament though.
No, they're not going back to Parliament. No, but they're going to reopen schools. Seems a bit sus, and it's just, I don't know. It's all just starting to, it's people. They're on about now in schools they're going to segregate children. You know that word, segregation. Like, what? It's the psychology behind it, and I mean, teachers, are they really? Based on what we're seeing as evidence of this COVID-19, this mysterious, and where it just sprung out of nowhere, and we haven't got real answers of its actual origin because there's been so many conflicting stories of it, and our death toll is worse coming out than it was going in, and yet, I don't know. It's just. And people, because they don't want to put their kids through that, and they don't want to put their kids through segregation, and they don't want to, they're on about now they're going to let some kids in on certain days and then other kids in on other days. They're not going to have full classes. It's just the psychology of it all, and teachers.
Richard, I think we've lost Richard there.
He kind of stuck there.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You said the psychology.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Rich?
No, this like... Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just the way you stick, man. It's like yesterday on the show where your Skype camera went and you were just there smiling at the Joker for about 10 minutes. And me and the guest we had on yesterday were just looking at you going, what happened to Richard? If some reason it always likes to freeze frame you. YouTube likes to freeze frames if you go on the toilet and having a really interesting time with
Every time I do a video, I pause for about 30 seconds like this, try to give it the old smolder, and then it captures me like this. It's amazing. I don't know how it does it. I think it's just out again. But yeah,
universe telling don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah. Well, you've got to put a smolder. I don't know if you're doing a video. You've got to look at it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just a bit. Oh, I don't know. It just feels like, to be honest with you, when this is how I said it, I feel like I didn't want to rant, but it feels like I've been saying this so long. I'm bored of hearing myself say it. I'm fed up of people just being actually have just the most. I would appreciate a pair of these blinkers, but just having blinkers on for the truth. And I share things on my Facebook, and they're controversial, right? And I want someone, and only recently, people have actually been going, well, this is da-da-da-da-da. And I've been like, oh, finally. Finally, somebody's actually put out the right, and they aimed at me, saying, well, Rich, you're double standards. And I'm like, no. I'm just wanting you to think about what I've posted in contradiction to what I posted like 20 minutes earlier or yesterday. And, it's just a bit, I don't know, it can get a bit deflating when you're constantly trying to show people and to say, and to me, because to me, it just seems normal to be that way, to be a bit more caring towards others and a bit more, empathetic and a bit more, just showing love, just being there for someone when there's no, You know, and just being that shoulder to lean on, and just being that shoulder to cry on, and just being, to me, it seems like what I want, what I would want others to do for me. You know, you don't need all these. We all want them. You know, I drive a trapped out old car, right? Everybody moans about my car because it breaks down every other week. But I love my car. I'm happy with my car.
And I don't know if you ever heard the concept of Trigger's brush. There's a show over here called Only Fools and Horses, and there's a joke in there where one of the characters, Trigger, has a brush. She has a mop, and he says he's a janitor. He is. He said, "I've replaced the brush.
It's a brush.
I've had this brush 20 years, and I've replaced the handle and the mop head several times." So obviously it's not the same brush he started off with. But Richard's car is very similar.
Yeah, but it's...
Well, it's actually linked to home in that car, honestly.
No, I know. We've been through some adventures.
It's always got us there.
Yeah, no, on a wing and a prayer. But it's just like material. I've never been... I do like my clothes. I'm materialistic over my clothes in a sense because I don't know. It's just because I got a bit of a Peter Pan complex. I don't know, or I just like, you know, I've always been that inclined. My clothes are my uniform, because it's the way I just believe people perceive us. But you know, the things people do for ridiculous reasons is incredible. You know, for that power, that seed of power. And what do you need? As long as you've got people around that love you and you've got the opportunity to see the world around you, what more? Why? I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It gets like a broken record sometimes. And you just feel like you're constantly repeating yourself, but it feels like you're talking to this. And, yeah, sorry, my rant's over. I just want to get that off my chest.
Well, I think we need to keep some things in mind, playing off of what you said, Richard, is that, you know, taking care of your basic needs is not being over materialistic. When you live your life for money, you're worshiping money, that's your whole center of attention is material things, and you're throwing values out the window, and you're throwing respect for other people out the window. This is when we're stepping into materialism. When we're able to be bought for things, that's when we're moving into that materialistic space. And we need to be careful of this. But the more people that say, you know what, no, I'm happy with this. I really don't need all of that stuff out there. I don't need a 6th-floor mansion to live in for myself. I'm really good with about 600 square feet or less. And I think that there's these aspects of shifting that we have to pay attention to, and we really do need to ask some of these bigger questions on a regular basis. Am I doing this because it's something I love? Am I doing this because it's going to contribute something beneficial to my life and the life of other people? Or am I doing this for the sake of money? Am I allowing myself to be bought out? Am I turning my power over? And this is one more thing of why they try to hold materialism in so strong. Because when we go into materialism, we are controlled. We're turning our power over. We're giving everything away. We're giving all of our rights away. We're giving all of our freedom away. And so, you know, these different pieces, and I think it's important you talked about the schools and the segregation. People have to speak up. The parents have to go into that school system and say, I'm not going to tolerate this. I'm not going to have my kid being separated. We have to get proactive. Parents need to get proactive and say, I want to join together. Let's get people of all these different ethnicities and let's join together and let's have regular time so that our kids can learn about these different belief systems, so that they can learn about the different practices, because there's incredible, amazing things to be learned. And we are only going to get to a place of wholeness. We're only going to find that strength when we incorporate our differences, when we bring the different pieces together. We're never going to do it by putting it all in one place. Just like when we put all of our resources in China, no country is going to be able to take care of itself. We need all of the different pieces. We need those different colors in the world. We need those different thoughts in the world. And when you look at the way, for example, the African American people, and I know you want to get something out, and I also want to acknowledge there's somebody in the chat room that had a question that I want to get to as well after you mention what you have to say, Richard. But when you look at these cultures, and again, why are they pulled on so much, this particular culture? Because their emotions, and their emotions get other people charged up. They're actually very inspirational people. And their nature is not to fight. It's not to be in war. Their nature, if you go back to the tribal communities, because Jesse studied the Bantu tribes, and you go into the tribal areas, what do? When somebody's angry, when somebody's going off on these things, they surround them in a circle and they hold them in love until they're past it. They don't let that stew and brew and everything like that. They love them through it. Yeah. And this is where this culture comes from. And I think when we see these rioters and we see these looters out there, they're disgracing in so many ways. They are not bringing in the rights. They're not bringing in the justice with what they're doing. They are disgracing this death that happened. And while I don't think that George Floyd necessarily knew it when he woke up that day and headed to the store what he was in for, I think as everything was going down, he did understand the bigger purpose. And I think he is going to be watching. And I think that we need to make sure that this death is not only in vain, that we bring the justice to it, that we open this door and we start learning to work together, and we bring in these pieces as the codes are talking about, that we come into harmony, we come into unity, we let these people be heard, we give them a voice, we give them a place. And, there's still some big awakenings in all of this, because the deception among their own people right now is going to be the hardest for them to take. The people that are supporting these crimes against them, some of them are their own people. And this is not okay. But we have to make sure that we are looking at people for individuals, and we're bringing them in as individuals, because not every white person's a bad guy, not every white person's a good guy, not every black person's a good guy, not every black person's bad guy. This is true no matter what belief system you're in. And if we just look at everybody by that 1% or that 5% that is having a really rough time in this life, then we're not going to get anywhere. We have to get back and realize that the bulk of the people, we want the same things. We want a peaceful world. We want to be able to speak our voice no matter who we are. We want to be able to share our opinions. We want people to know the truth. And we can get there, and we can do it. And so I think that we have to continue to honor what is going on in this situation, but we need to do it in the peaceful ways, because that is what his life was about. His life was about teaching us something, and if we don't get the lesson now, we're in for a lot harder lessons.
Definitely. I just hope the thing I worry about is the lazy barstools who will just send their kids to school because they've had them for 3 months, and they'll just be like, go to school, because you do get them, right? You do get them.
Yeah.
You get them type of people that go, well, they've been hanging around me for 3 months, I'll just send them. And then you get the people who actually care about their children. The other mothers and other fathers are going to be looking at them going, oh, why are you buying so, pain in the ass? And it puts people off.
Yeah. But to be honest with you, sorry to interject, a lot of people are saying they ain't going to do it. A lot of parents are saying that. And when you don't need everyone, you just need enough. Because when your voice equals or shouts louder than that of what's on the TV each day, when the voice in the community outside on your doorstep is louder than what makes more sense, or more people are doing it, I would say, then the people who are sheeple and who go along with the crowd will go along with the prevailing way of doing things. So,
but it's not happened before, Joe. That's the thing I'm trying to make the point of. And I don't want to put a dampener on it. And I don't want to put a kibosh on it. I'm just saying it's not this. We're in this situation because it hasn't happened before. It's happened with segregation, back in the day with the blacks and the whites, and people started to stand up for it, and it made a change. But racism still is probably as prevalent.
No. I was talking specifically about your point with the children, with how people have reacted to schools reopening. I don't know I know England has done it this week. I don't know how many kids have been going back to school or what the actual thing is about that. But obviously the other points you're saying, it's exactly like Anne just said. If we don't learn the lessons from this now, we are in for a much tougher ride.
Yeah, we'll have a harder one.
Yeah.
And the codes for racism are about division. It's about keeping people separated. It is about keeping people in opposition. It is about keeping competition going. And we need to think about this in all aspects of our world, that we have to start pulling the competition out. We have to start breaking down the walls and realize that we're sharing the same coin. We're just on different sides of it. We have to realize that we have been pitted into this division. And when we step back and we get into observation, we can see it. When we can start to clear our mind with it. And racists are all about creating division. They're all about interrupting peace. They're all about disconnecting us from spirit, from soul, from the God energy. And so we have to stop and go, okay, what is happening here? Oh, there's violence that's happening here. There's disruption happening here. There's all this disruption of peace. Okay, we need to step back from this and wake up a little bit. And we have to put our foot down in these situations. And we think that sometimes we don't have enough power, but it only takes one person to step up and start to voice something, and you'll realize how many people are behind that person. It does happen. It does come around. It does come through. And the key for us is each one of us has to be willing to take it on and say, you know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to start making friends with people of different ethnicities. I'm going to go out and start learning about different cultures. I'm going to go out and I'm going to start participating in things that have a diversity to them. Because again, we have to realize that it's that diversity. It's all these different components that are going to make us strong. And when we bring these different components together and we unify them, that's where our strength is. It's not in any one race or culture or belief system or any of that. It's when we unify. And that's where we see the results. And that's the big opportunity that I believe we're being offered up here. You know, these groups that have come in, like in this situation, their codes are directly connected to creating blocks, to stopping progression, to pushing us back in time, pushing us back in thoughts, pushing us back into ignorance, pushing us back to where we don't have a voice and where we do turn everything over. And we can't just say, oh, that kid's a rough kid or that person's a bad person. We need to take them in and keep showing them different examples. You know, it was like Jesse. I mean, she had no problem with the ethnicities in different places because she just treated everybody with a kind of love. You know, she didn't care about whether they had a rough background or a good background. She just treated people with respect. And when we come from these basic fundamental principles, that's where we're going to change it. That's where we're going to come back in and do it. But again, we have to open up because we have to realize that even though certain communities are starting to get more of a voice, they're starting to get their own TV shows and things like this, it is still a minute piece to what the rest of it is. And we have to keep bridging these gaps consciously, actively, procreating the new dimension, and that comes down to how we live our individual lives and how we're going to do it. There was a question in the chat area here that says, how come the license plate says police on it? I honestly don't know, because I didn't see that part. I didn't focus in on it, but that would come back to some of the theory part that I was talking about, Richard, where we had questions whether the person in the video was actually that police officer, and maybe whether it was the person in the video or the one that was arrested. I don't know. One of them, it seemed like a stage situation, and these people were actors at times. That was part of the connection between George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. They had both had their, well, let's say acting careers. I don't know if some people would call it that, but anyways, that being set aside, it's, it very easily could have just been that stage scene, not a legitimate thing. But I can't completely answer it because I didn't see that piece. But if that is true, and if that's what the license plate says, it just goes to verify that these weren't legitimate cops. These, or they weren't. There was some other play or some other hand.
I've seen the picture. I haven't checked if it's actually on the video, because the video was a couple of days back on my Facebook, and I have shared a lot. But I have seen the picture where it's supposed to say police on the license plate. And people have been asking, why does it say it? Like I said, to me, it just, it doesn't. I watched it, I think twice, all in all, and because I don't know why the second time it was worse. Normally a video like that, the second time you sort of like go, oh. But the second time, it was actually, it was worse. And it made me feel worse.
I found that every time I've seen it, and like I've seen stuff before where, we've seen violent acts, or even acts where people have been, tragically hurt or killed. And that, particularly, every time it comes up, it hurts. It's painful. There's just a deeper pain to it than... it is something I can't explain. If that makes any sense whatsoever. Maybe it's because I've been stuck in my house for the last 10 weeks, and there's not been a lot to sort of distract me from it. Then we've seen a lot of horrifying pictures, news videos, Facebook videos come out over the years. Things like ISIS beheadings, the boy with the Syria conflict, and all these different things that have come out over the years, which unfortunately, and I mean this in the greatest respect, this is the latest and demonstration of just how messed up our world actually is, that this is constantly shown to sort of fuel a narrative, then sell newspapers or eyes on TV or YouTube shows. But yeah, when you were saying it did. I don't know. It feels there's just something so horrific about it.
Well, I think both the codes, as we've talked about, have really shared a lot of this insight of the deeper layers to this.
Yeah,
we know the deeper layers, and I think because of those that are instigating the violence and things out of this, and using this as a catalyst for their own things, that this particular, they're not as subtle as they used to be. They're becoming more and more out in the open. They're not hiding things as much, which is good on one hand, maybe not so good on another hand. But when we look at it, it's just something like that, a license plate that says police on it. It drives it so far home of how staged something is, how fake it is, how deliberate it is, how it is not an accident. and this is not acceptable. And it is, as sentient beings, as sovereign beings, you can't help but feel that. You can't help but feel.
It feels like you're watching a snuff
what that
film.
person was going through. You're feeling it because of that unity that is coming up, that we're starting to create in the world. And you can't, it just hits you harder when it's flat out in your face of how deliberate something is. Yeah. And it's a hard piece for the human self to swallow. It's a hard piece for the human self to go, wow. I mean, like, I've known this intellectually, but it's never been put in my face this way. And when you combine that with all the code influences and the purpose and all the other pieces that were behind that, and you've got this blatant look at staged, I can't deny it anymore. And, again, I imagine that might have been something because of the type of shoots and things that they would do and the associations with all of this. What they were connected to, it just, it would be like a car that they would use on a movie set. So I'm sure there were different things coming up. Again, like there was questions about Chauvin and the uniform and all of that stuff there. So I have no doubt that license plate is probably also connected to that whole scenario of a stage, to them, like a literal stage, like shooting a movie.
But what you also got to look at as well, obviously the man died.
Right.
Right. And the way that was shot, like you said, it was shot like a fucking snuff film. I'm sorry, but how you can stand there with a mobile phone in your hand and actually just shoot that is beyond me. I don't think I could even do it. To put myself in that mentality, I'm stood there watching that. I can't comprehend how someone could just keep their phone on that and shoot it, right? And go, right. I'm going to put this on Facebook. I can't. And I think that's where when you get these deeper layers, like why did it have police on it, and people are gonna. It's that much of an affront. It's that abhorrent to how the average person who has empathy, right? That it's like you want to find a way to make it false or fake, or you want to find different things in it because you don't want it to be true. It's so far outside what you are used to and what you are willing to accept, what your worldview is based around, that you will try everything to look at it and go, well, look at this, or look at that, or look at this, and look at that, and look at all of it, and that can sometimes have the detrimental effect of what we saw there was a mobile phone basically filming a man's murder. And to me, from a personal standpoint, everything other part of that is irrelevant, because you deal with that. Unless that is dealt with, then you are allowing all that other stuff to be possible. Whereas if it was actually dealt with in the first place, if that cop was arrested, or like if when you're allowing all these questions to come up by not even arresting the other three men, at the end of the day, if the other two guys were recruits and didn't know what was going on, fair enough, right? If that can be proven, or that can come out, at the end of the day, if these people hadn't spoken out, that Derek, whatever his surname, I can't remember his surname now, would still be on the streets like the several others he's got away with before. So this is that to me. With everything that you're saying, in order to honour that person, we have to realise that that's all you need to know. Essentially, a man was murdered on camera. That's all you need to know.
And you have to wonder, who was doing the filming? Was it one of these other two officers? Was this because certainly some bystander? I mean, this is like what you hear about where they used to do like the glory rapes, right? And things like that. For a while that was popular, and they would film everything, and they would film, the girls getting raped. And it's a very similar thing. And I think that these recruits, I don't think it was an issue that they didn't know what was going down or what was happening. I think they full well known. I think they were being trained.
How can you sit there and watch
I think they were being trained.
Yeah.
Because I think they were being trained under these officers that used excessive force and that did it. And I think part of not hiding this stuff anymore and making this stuff so public is not only their attempts to glorify what they're doing in this distorted, perverted way for, the victory, like the chalk mark, like we saw, a decade or whatever, 2 decades back with the rapes. But I think also that it is an aspect of where they want to show the world, we are police officers and you can't do anything. It's a way of instilling fear into the public. And look, we'll do this to somebody like this. What do you think we can do to you? So this is another one of those subtle programmings that are coming up. And this is why we need the peaceful protests. This is why people have to stand up and say, we're going to have justice in this situation, because we can't allow that fear to override us. We can't allow that. And of course, when you follow that up with the riots, what is that about? It's about fear. And I agree with you, Jared. It is atrocious. The fact that somebody could just stand there and film that, and they had to be part of it somewhere,
and not react to it,
not say anything about it, to just stand there and film it, and to just and to not what on your phone, take another part of your phone and go 911, say, hey, I've got, text in something and say, hey, I got 4 cops here killing somebody.
Yeah. What have you spotted, Richard? You've got our luck about you. Oh, we've lost Richard. He had that look as if he'd seen something. Yeah, I honestly feel he might have actually seen something. We'll hopefully get him back now on the call. But yeah, that's the kind of point that I wanted to make, because when people say things about things being staged, there's a lot of talk in this sort of community, especially when in the paranormal sort of conspiratorial sort of community, then, because they are closely linked. Even though I don't, I like to look at all views. I don't class.
Am I back on with you?
You're back on audio wise, but I don't know what's happened to your image. What did you see, Richard? Because you had this look about you that you saw something.
No, I was just thinking, as the person who obviously took the video, have they been interviewed or come forward? Do they know the origin of the film?
As far as I know, no. As far as I know, there's no... That person has not come forward, or I haven't heard anything about them. And, here again, we have to keep questioning these things. Like, why is the media not all over who took that video? Why is why are they all over certain things and not over other things? And, our media here, I don't know about other places. I imagine it's very similar other places, but they are not covering some of the things that they need to be covering, or you would think as if news was objective, which we know in these days and times it is not, but if it was objective, they would be covering certain things, and they're not, and they don't want to do it because it destroys the narrative they're presenting. It shows that things aren't the way that they want us to see it. I mean, there's so many pieces in that, but agreed, why has nobody to track this down? We're in a society, you can track down a phone anywhere. I mean, granted, maybe it was a disposable phone. Yeah. Maybe somebody was being paid to stand there and do it.
Hang on, we are bringing in a systems worldwide to track and trace people because of this coronavirus. And yet, this is shot, and no one is talking about the person that shot it. When all over the world, that's all everyone is saying is download this app, save our health system, protect people, save lives. And in the middle of
Yep.
that, you've got someone filming a murder, and no one knows where the hell it's come from. You know,
That just dawned on me that I thought they'd already spoke to the guy. I just realised that. Oh my God! I just realised that hasn't happened. That's actually kind of spun my brain a bit. You know, he should have been on every newslet in America. You know what I mean? He would have been. You'd have thought by now he's probably been interviewed by Oprah Winfrey.
Well,
you
the
know
thing
what I mean?
is, when you had school shootings, or when you have things like the Columbine shooting, or when we had Dunblane over here in the UK, or we had different things like that. What the incident in London a couple of years ago with the two, I don't know if it was like a beheading or something. That was
Yeah.
You had people interviewed talking about what they saw. It's been none of that.
Well, and it's the whole distraction piece, Jared. It's like, don't look at this. Look at this other hand over here. Don't look at the one behind my back and see what it's doing. Look at this one that I'm waving at you. Yeah. And you know, another reason to bring the riots in. And you know, we talk about the riots in there, and one of the hopes that they were wanting with the riots was that Trump would install martial law so they could show him as a dictator. Well, he didn't do that. He's not going to do that. What did he say? He told the states, you need to call in the National Guard. You need to call in this force, because he knew full well they could handle it. There was no need for martial law whatsoever in the situation. But here again, everybody's distracted with the riots. Nobody stopped and said, hey, who was this person filming the video? That's how desensitized we've become to certain factors, and how much when they started to do the media, they you know, hit everything in this different way. And you'll notice how quickly they transferred off of the death, off of the murder, and hardly report anything about that, but they're all over the riots.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but there's something disconcerting about groups of people chanting his last words. I don't know why it made me feel sick.
That is part of the Antifa and the other movements that are involved in this. Antifa, we say that a lot just because it is kind of a blanket for a lot of other things. And here again, they're all connected and paid from the same source, ultimately. And so that is part of the ones that are oftentimes inciting the violence. The ones that are inciting the violence are given these code phrases to chant, to repeat, because the peaceful protesters, they're not doing that. They're not walking down the streets. The ones that were really connected to George Floyd, they were walking down the streets in more of a silence, in more of a prayer, in more of an honoring. The people that gathered that were in prayer, they actually got upset at CNN's reporter because he was sitting there talking and reporting something, and people are like, shut up, because they were having a prayer at that time. And so the ones that are chanting this, I can't breathe, that is part of the operative. That is part of the promotion of the riots. That is part of feeding the violence. So it's really the people that are about ready to loot something, or that are creating the riots, that are chanting that. The people that are trying to honor him, the people that are trying to pay respect to him, the people that are trying to just see justice served through the peaceful protests are not saying those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you see? I'm aware time's sort of ticking on now. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover tonight, Anne?
I think a lot of the big fundamental pieces, I think that we've talked about and we've covered, and I'm so grateful to have this time to come on to share this, and I really hope people will take.
You're welcome anytime. Welcome anytime.
And you know, I love to come back and talk about any event that's going on, because actually a video that I cut, I don't know, a month or so ago, about connected to food shortages, and that being one of the upcoming ploys of things. Everybody else is just starting to get on that bandwagon. But, Jared, I really hope people will take this, and I know we've been on here a long time, but that they will share it and they will get these concepts out there, because there are so many avenues that are being blocked where people aren't being shown things, and it's going to take a lot of people sharing things on their pages and being willing to say, look at these views, look at these pieces that came together, look at what these people are talking about, and we need to maybe consider that. But it takes people being willing to share things. It takes people being willing to post something so that we can continue to hold an event of this nature and what's happening in our world for what it's truly meant to be, and to let the doors open up to where we need things to go, and to not just sit back and shut up and go, well, they're blocking everything, nobody's going to see it anyways. As we well know, when people share things, and many people start sharing things, then it does get known. And even if they adjust the numbers, like, I don't even care about the numbers, it's more about getting the work out there. It's the same thing that I've said with my book. I could sit there and hold out and say, no, I'm only going to sell the book a certain way because that is what's going to be most profitable. But for me, it's more important that the book gets out there. So even if I end up making next to nothing in order to get the book out there, then I find that much more important, because we need those wisdoms. We need people coming together. We need people understanding the currents of what's happening on a day-to-day basis, because it's going to help them put these pieces together. It's going to help them come together. And
I'm going to be focusing over the next, if you're okay with this, Richard, I'm going to be focusing over the next couple of weeks now. I'll put this video and your last video into some smaller chunks and put them out on the channel as well, because I think we've talked about stuff that's really relevant at the moment, and I think by putting it out like that, as well as obviously this interview as well, so people can see the smaller chunks and the bigger interview if they want to, I think that would be a way of getting more and more people actually having maybe this conversation. Rich, what do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. This is, as with this channel, as we've said, we started off with a theme, if you like, and it's grown beyond that, because it's in the realm of, we are getting this message, you are getting this message from the code on, we are getting this message from spirit, we are getting this message from other people, from different sources, and so, it can only lead to the truth. What we are trying to put out there. We're not conspiracy nuts. We're promoting peace. We're saying, look at what's going on, and don't play into their narrative. Don't become the thing they want you to become. Don't be part of the system they want to control. And that's all we're saying. We're not saying, we're not coming out with some of the crazy conspiracies that's on YouTube and Facebook at the minute. We're trying to be truthful and say, question things. Don't just go with what you're being shown. And I've been guilty of it. Sometimes we've all been guilty of it. You see something and you think, oh, that's terrible. And then you realize after, you think, what was the reason behind it? So we will definitely.
We'll work on.
We want it more than anything. We want the truth to be out there more than anything.
I'm going to do a video tomorrow, because it's shut, and there's a lot about truth in the sessions I want to share. So I'm going to do a video tomorrow based on the kind of personal experience that I had with my friend, to lead into that, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about where you came from the last interview, and over the course of hopefully the next week, most of the next 2 weeks, depending on how quickly I can get these things out, we'll have a drip feed of these videos going out as much as we possibly can. So I will do that for you over the course of the next week.
Wonderful.
We'll get that. We'll get all of it linking back to your channel as well. So
give me the recordings that you put out so that I can upload them. Yeah. Not only on my own channel with YouTube, the Connecting Codes channel, but that I can also upload them on my BitChute channel and go that direction and share them easily that way. So,
if you could send me a link to your BitChute channel as well, because I've just started getting into BitChute. Mm-hmm. So I could do something.
And it's a good backup. I use BitChute as a backup for my Connecting Codes. My regular channel, I have so much on there, and it's it doesn't deal with the world events. It deals with just basic concepts, life concepts, and things like that. But the Connecting Codes does have what deals with world events. Some people, they want to call it conspiracies, but the reality, a lot of what people have been programmed to be conspiracy theories are proving true. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't still have some untruths by some people who, want a lot of show and a lot of flash and a lot of recognition. But, don't pull back, because there are pieces in there that are true in there. And, I know I've done them. So,
I think everything has been said
that's
tonight.
a big theme at the moment.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
People who we believe are supposed to be telling us the truth are turning out to be liars, and people who believe are supposed to be conspiracy theories and nutters are telling the truth, and that seems to be prevalent at the moment. Yeah. So,
we will do our best to put everything that you said out. For you guys watching, thank you for sticking with us. Please share this around if you can. I'll be sharing this interview around tomorrow when it goes live properly on the channel, because it'll take up until about tomorrow lunchtime, our time to process on YouTube now. So I'll start sharing it from tonight, tomorrow. And I've already know several sources I can share it to on Facebook and Twitter and all the rest of it. So I'm hoping that we can definitely get some eyeballs on this and maybe get people talking about it, and maybe sharing some of their own views and opinions as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, is we have to just keep kind of putting things out there and doing it with the best integrity that we can. I know I've taken some heat from some people that don't, where my views have been different than what they want to believe, and it's challenging. It's challenging at times, because they, I can see where they're buying into the programs and things like that, and I understand where they're coming from, and but I'm not there to be in battle or in war with them, or to be in these big arguments with them. And I think that it's hard. At some point, we are going to have to face the realities of these things being the case, and we're going to be seeing a lot of things coming down. I actually have no question at this point. Of course, I'll know better in another couple of months when we find out what the Democratic Party is going to do. But at this point, I honestly can't see any way that Trump would not be reelected to office, honestly. And I think there's a lot of countries that are watching for that, and that's going to be a game changer when that happens along the way. But again, we've got to open up and look at the bigger patterns that are happening in there, and it's so easy to distort them, and it's so easy to say we have to rely on who, or the CDC, or or this organization, or that scientist, or whatever. And we have to realize that corruption is everywhere, and there's a lot of innocent people that are being played as pawns in their bigger games. And I oftentimes wonder, I think of what happens when these groups like Black Lives Matter or Antifa or these other groups wake up and see who they're really supporting. And I can only imagine what's going to happen when that comes around at some point. but I think the bigger focus is we have to keep living our own life the best we can, and like I said, I'm happy to come on, and I'm glad you're doing this, and I appreciate it, and I look forward to being able to share everything out, and
You're
just
welcome
encourage
on
people to take that chance.
Just drop
Anytime.
Just drop me a PM and we'll get it sorted.
Anytime.
Anytime,
man.
Right.
Anytime.
I'm going to say it's now coming up to 11:15 our time, so I'm going to say thank you very much to everyone who's watched the show today. And again, we are going to be putting more information out in the coming weeks. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Anne, for coming on the show. Richard, is there any final words before we close for today?
No, I think I've said enough on this subject. I'm just, just keep sharing it, keep it in your minds, and I keep saying this: question what you're being told, check it, research it. I know lots of people who are coming to this conclusion because they're researching it. The truth is going to come out, whether you like it or not. And in regards to everything that's happening at the moment, there are too many people questioning it. The truth is going to come out, and it's going to be an awful thing if you just sat there and you have not done the research, because you're going to be left in a really strange place of unknown. And so check it out, research it, look at the answers, look for the things that don't seem true. And are questionable, but everything you see, you have to question.
Well, thank you guys for coming on. Thank you guys for everything. I've been Jared Walters.
I've been Richard Oliver.
And love and light, pal peeps. Take care.
Love and light, pal peeps. Bye-bye.
Bye.